Today, we have an amazing opportunity to talk to Michael Hyatt, who is a self-development mentor to millions. He is a known public speaker and New York Times best-selling author and podcast host of Lead to Win. Today, we're going to be talking about his new book, Free to Focus, Achieve More by Doing Less. Because come on, who does not need to grow in the area of focus? Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Evan. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, for starters, I see a squirrel running right across my fence. So how come you decided to write a book about focus?
Yeah, well, a lot of people struggle with those squirrels. Some of them are real, like I've got real ones outside my window, but a lot of them are just those shiny objects, to use another metaphor, that distract us. But I think it's really the superpower of our age. People that have focus are people that are going to advance in their careers, people whose businesses are going to grow, people who are going to accomplish the things they want and really create an amazing life, because we live in an age of hyper distraction. For starters, we've got the big social media companies who spend billions of dollars on the best behavioral psychologists figuring us out how to keep us glued to their platforms instead of doing the work that we need to do. So it's a little bit like David and Goliath. Cal Newport uses that metaphor in his new book about digital minimalism, but I think it's really, really true. If we can focus, we're going to be able to accomplish the things we want.
You just said a word I've never heard before: digital minimalism. I mean, put together, I've heard digital, I've heard minimalism. I've fasted TV or I've never fasted Facebook or anything. I use that for business. But just go into digital minimalism. What is that?
Well, it's a new book by Cal Newport. Okay, Cal Newport wrote a book previous to that. His previous book was called Deep Work. And Cal is a computer scientist and a professor at Georgetown University. And so he talks about what these media companies are doing to our brains, what social media is doing to our brains, and our ability to focus and stay in the moment and do the kind of work that really is the creative problem solving that all of us need to advance our businesses and our lives. And so he talks about being intentional about our digital consumption and being minimalistic about it. And it's a great book. In fact, it's a great companion to my book, Free to Focus. Cal endorsed my book. And I think it's kind of sort of more of the how-to of what he talks about in his book.
That is awesome. Well, I want to talk about your book. As I was doing some research, you have a 3-step process called Stop, Cut, and Act. Would you explain each one of those steps and why it's important?
Sure. So the book is actually divided into 3 parts. Each part has 3 chapters, but the 3 parts are the movements that you describe. I talk first about cutting, and then stopping, and then I talk about cutting, and then I talk about acting. Now, why would you stop first, especially in a book that's about productivity? I mean, you think we want to go, we want to take action, we want to execute. But one of the things that I say in the book, and the point I make in that whole section of the book, is that we've got to get off the hamster wheel. We've got to stop and take stock of what's happening to us. Because kind of the conventional wisdom today, the culture that we're in, and the current that we're swimming against, is this idea of what I call the hustle fallacy, where you achieve more by doing more. And the problem is that's got a limit to us, because all of us only have 168 hours a week. So once we've exhausted those, we're done. We can't scale. We can't do more. And I would argue just the opposite. We actually achieve more by doing less, but we've got to stop and get a clear productivity vision of where we're going. What's the purpose of productivity? And so I talk about that in those first 3 chapters. And I'll keep going with the overview here. But in the second section of the book called Cut, this is what we do with all that stuff that is, overloading our task management system, filling up our calendars, and basically consuming our lives. And so what I talk about there is we need to eliminate. There's just some things we need to say no to and get off our plate and be brave. There's some things we can automate and use technology or the power of rituals to kind of put things on autopilot. And then we also need to delegate. And this is something that everybody talks about, few people know how to do, and people it scares them for some reason. And in the last section on activate, I really just talk about how to consolidate, create your ideal week, employee mega batching. Then I talk about designating, designing your ideal quarter, your ideal week, your ideal day. And then I talk about the whole last chapter is really about activate. And if you have an offensive plan, how do you fend off all the distractions and the interruptions that threaten to derail us on a daily basis?
So for someone like myself who is self-employed as a real estate agent, there's many individuals out there that they are the only ones in their business. And for someone like me, it becomes a little bit harder to delegate things because I have no one to delegate them to, unless if I pay an assistant, which realistically, I don't have the funds based off of per transaction that I'm doing. And so my question to you is for an individual such as myself who just has to do it all until I get to the point where I can actually hire the stuff away. How do I minimize the distractions? How do I minimize the stuff that I don't like to do but still have to do? Meanwhile, focus on the areas that actually make the money.
Yeah.
Or productivity.
So this is the challenge of being in business for yourself, right? So I coach entrepreneurs. I've got 400 people in my coaching program, all of whom are business owners and entrepreneurs. And all of them have struggled with this at some point because entrepreneurs, business owners, self-employed people typically have one of three sentences rattling around in their brain when it comes to delegation. They think first, as you expressed it, I can't afford it. I guess I'm going to have to do it myself. Or they say, if I want it done right, I have to do it myself. Or the third sentence is it takes longer to explain how to do it. I might as well do it myself. If the answer to those questions is always going to be yourself, then there's going to be a ceiling on how much you can grow. Because here's the thing, Evan, you have 168 hours. You got to spend some of that sleeping, some of that eating, some of that with your family, some of that taking care of yourself, some of it sleeping. And so, you can't scale beyond those hours because time is a finite resource unless you figure out how to delegate. One of the cool things, and let me just bust each of one of these sentences. First of all, the one, I can't afford it. You'll never be able to move to the next level in your business until you take a risk and make an investment. Now, here's what that doesn't mean. You do not have to hire a full-time assistant. The cool thing today is that we can hire part-time virtual assistants to help us so that we can delegate those tasks that are non-billable, that don't produce revenue, that don't produce profit in our business, which frees us up to do the things that actually bring in more money to grow the business. So when I left Thomas Nelson Publishers in 2011, I was the CEO of that company for 6 years, and I left to start on my entrepreneurial journey. And I had to, work and bill out to make money and to develop or generate cash flow. But I found myself managing my calendar, managing my inbox, booking my travel, all that kind of administrative stuff that none of my clients were willing to pay me to do. And it was keeping me from doing the very thing that would bring in more money. So I went to a company, Belay Solutions. I don't have any association with them other than I'm a happy, satisfied client. But I went to Belay Solutions and I hired a virtual assistant for 5 hours a week. And it kind of scared me because, like you, I thought I really can't afford this, but I also realized I was going to stay stuck unless I made the first move.
Right.
So what I did was I hired somebody for 5 hours a week. I immediately saw a huge gain in my productivity such that within 2 weeks, I was billing out those additional hours and more than paying for that person because I was able to bill out at about $150 an hour and I was paying them about $35 an hour through the service. So then I went to 10 hours a week and then I went to 20 hours a week. And today, I've got 40 employees and it's always been the case that when I invest in somebody else, it's always a bit of a stretch, but it always brings money in. And so that's how you got to think about delegation. But in the early stages, you've got to ask yourself, what's the best and highest use of you? In other words, what are the tasks that if you could focus 100% or say 90% of your time on, what would you be doing? And that's where I talk about a concept called the freedom compass. And we can talk about that if you want to.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So that's chapter 2 in the book. And it's all about evaluation. So I talk about your natural path to productivity. So not all of us are the same, but the one place we are the same is that we all have got more tasks to complete than we've got time to do them. So I developed this visual model called the Freedom Compass. And think of a traditional compass that has north, south, east, and west. North is where your passion and your proficiency come together. So it's the things you love to do, the things you're naturally gifted to do, and the things you're proficient at, such that you have a skill level that'll actually make you money. You can bill or charge for what it is you do. That I call your desire zone. Straight south of that is what I call the drudgery zone. This is where you have neither passion, you don't love it, in fact, you hate it, and you're not very good at it. It's not in your proficiency. So no passion, no proficiency, your drudgery zone, and it becomes a grind. Now, it's different for everybody, but for me, it would be things like managing my email inbox, booking travel, filing expense reports, anything administrative. Fortunately, my administrative assistant, who is full-time now, his desire zone activities are my drudgery zone activities. So we're like, two sides of the same coin. We're a wonderful complement for each other. Now, East and West are kind of interesting too, because East is what I call the disinterest zone, where you don't have any passion. You don't love doing this, but you're pretty good at it. And so for me, for example, I'm pretty good at accounting, but it's not the best and highest use of me. I can do QuickBooks, I can do invoicing, I can balance the checkbook, I can do all that stuff, and I'm good at it. But I don't have a lot of passion around it. And so it's in my disinterest zone. And a lot of people get stuck in the disinterest zone, don't feel any passion, and as a result, don't have a lot of job satisfaction. Due west is the distraction zone, and you've really got to watch out for this if you're a solopreneur or a business owner. This is where you go basically to escape from your most important work, because it's easier, downhill work, and it can become fake work. So for me, when I was first starting as a solopreneur in 2011, I like to do some web design. I like to fool with WordPress plugins. I like to do some graphic design. But the truth is, while I had a lot of passion, I wasn't very proficient at it. In fact, I brought my entire website down a number of times because I wasn't working on a development site. I was just, playing around with plugins and messed it up. But it was a whole lot easier than doing what was going to bring in the money, which was book speaking engagements, or create that speech, or write that book, all those things that were in my desire zone and needed to be done. But instead, I found myself playing in the destruction zone. So the idea is that the path to greater productivity is to eliminate everything you possibly can as soon as you can. And it's a journey. That's why it's a compass. We're on the way to a destination, but eliminate everything you can as soon as you can that falls outside your desire zone. Right. Does that make sense?
For me, it makes total sense. It's really funny. I don't know if you've heard of this gentleman by the name of Dave Jewett or not, but
I haven't.
He's here in Tulsa. He has this program called Your One Degree, and it's very, very similar to what you're saying. You have your greens, which are your high drivers, your yellows, and your reds. And it's learning how to operate in your greens, not the yellows or the reds. And so for me, this is all resonating. I just need to take stock in and actually do it, because, that distraction zone, I heavily operate sometimes in there, because while I'm good at making cold calls for real estate for sub-buy owners or expired listings, I absolutely hate it. It's one of those things. I'm good at it. That's where the money comes in, but I hate doing it. So I guess that's an issue within itself, is the thing that I'm good at that produces the money I hate doing.
Well, this is very common. You can't believe how many dentists I talk to who get paid because they work on people's teeth, but hate it. Dentists of all professions have the highest suicide rate. Wow. And it's because a lot of them, not all of them, thankfully, but a lot of them are operating their disinterest zone. And if you stay too long in your disinterest zone, it'll make you crazy. Now, let me just be quick to say that this is a journey. You can't get there overnight. Sometimes you have to do things like that, like I've had to do in my career, in order to put, bread on the table and keep the lights on. And that's okay. But once you identify them, you can say, okay, as soon as I'm able, I'm willing to make some investment, but I want to see the return, then I'll make some more investment. And this is one of those things I'm going to eliminate as soon as I can. Right. So I give kind of a priority to this when I get to the cut section of the book, Free to Focus. And I talk about, first of all, you first want to eliminate the drudgery zone activities, the things that you don't love and you're not good at. No passion, no proficiency. Then you want to move to the distraction zone, because that has no value whatsoever. It's just a place you go to escape. Then you want to eliminate the disinterest zone, because that's where you don't have any passion and it's going to frustrate you over time. And then as you do that, you'll move more and more into your desire zone. And that, that for most of us, that takes a couple of years to get there.
Okay. Well, and just for any of our listeners, I don't hate real estate. I hate making cold calls. So I want to make that clear. No one's going to want to use me in real estate if they think I hate real estate, but I don't. I don't like having to get hung up on a million times. So, but in your book, Michael, you were talking about in the zones and everything like that. You were talking about front stage, backstage. And to me, that it just reminds me of the iceberg concept as well. Talk about the idea of the front stage and backstage, because I think so many people don't realize that they're operating in that.
Yeah. So I stole this metaphor from William Shakespeare. Remember, he said, all the world's a stage. And it is. And so I think of life or time as divided into one of three categories. There's front stage activity, and that's what we're getting paid to do. That's what our clients think they're buying for you. That probably means, when you're negotiating with a buyer on behalf of the seller, it might be, prospecting, but it's anything where you're actually doing the things that bring in the money into your business, what people are paying for. I mean, in a real stage, it's when the actors are out there performing in front of a live audience. But the secret to success in front stage is being rigorous and disciplined about the backstage activities. This is the stuff your clients are probably completely unaware of. They don't know all that goes in, to getting those listings and marketing those homes and getting them onto the market, negotiating, with buyers, all that stuff. That's the backstage work. And I've got the backstage work too. And of course, actors, they've got, rehearsals, they've got lines to memorize, they've got costuming, there's all this stuff that goes on backstage. But here's the third part of time that a lot of people forget about, and it's directly related to productivity, and that's offstage time. Some people don't even know there's an offstage. Their life consists almost 100% of front stage or backstage. But if you don't take deliberate, intentional time off stage, you won't experience the kind of rejuvenation you need to perform at the highest level. So one of the things I advocate for in the book is really deliberate offstage time. Some people call it margin. For me, it looks like not working on the evenings, not working on the weekends. I know it's tough to do in the real estate business, but you've got to find time when you can be off stage, time when you can stop thinking about work, talking about work, reading about work, doing work, and just let your mind rejuvenate. All the science on this is clear. When we get, for example, a good solid 8 hours of sleep a night, we're at our best the next day. We're going to be more focused, more productive, and more successful if we do that. The jury's in. But so many people think they're going to be more productive by, sleeping 4 to 6 hours a night. That's a recipe for real problems, not only in terms of productivity, but problems in your health and problems that are going to creep up and create bigger problems for you in the future.
So you've done a lot of these interviews because literally you are leading into so many of the questions that I have written. So either I'm very basic or you're extremely good. So I'm going to go with you're extremely good because I don't like the idea of being basic. So you hit the nail on the head. As me, for a real estate agent, I often have to work from home. The nature of my industry is typically days and mostly in the evenings when people get off. How do I separate, or not just myself, but our listeners, how do we create those boundaries? Because as a real estate agent, I don't know other people's industries, but it's a little bit harder for me because most of my clients, when they get off work, they talk with me. And at the same time, that's the same time my wife wants my attention. My two boys want my attention. It's the same time that I have for myself. And, maybe I just spend more time doing that during the day. I don't know the answer to that. And I'd love to hear what advice you'd give to our audience and myself.
Well, I think first of all, we've got to reframe constraints. Constraints and boundaries, hard edges, are some of the best ways to get more productive and to give yourself a life. Because my goal is to help entrepreneurs like you win at work and succeed at life. So I want you to have sustainable success where you don't blow out your health, blow up your marriage, blow out your relationship with your kids. And all that means you've got to give deliberate attention to those things. So here's the power of constraints. Have you gone on a vacation recently?
No.
Okay. So just imagine for a minute then.
Right.
For most people that go on a vacation, like I was recently in the Caribbean with my family, And so on the Friday before we left on Saturday morning, we flew out on Saturday morning. We had a hard boundary. You know, I was going to get on that plane at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, and I wasn't going to work, wasn't going to think about work, wasn't going to talk about work, wasn't going to do work. So everything that needed to get done while I was gone had to get finished up on that Friday. I had a hard boundary. I had a constraint that actually helped me, worked for me. And so you can bet that on Friday afternoon, as I was nearing the deadline of putting it all up and getting ready to leave, I wasn't getting sidetracked by social media. I wasn't getting distracted by frivolous conversations. I was on a mission. Well, those kind of constraints can help anyone in any profession. Now, in my profession, what that looks like is I finish up at 6 p.m. So I have a hard boundary. The lights actually in this office that I'm standing in right now go off automatically 6 p.m. I'm standing here in the dark, at least in the winter, if I've not exited the building by then. But also it means I don't work on Saturdays and Sundays. So how does it work with a realtor or somebody that has a different kind of schedule? It may mean that you have to quarantine or set off as offstage time, maybe the first couple hours in the morning, you know, and maybe you have a conversation with your wife and you say, look, I need to be available to my clients in the evening. That's the best time for me to do the business, but I want to compensate for that by giving you time in the morning. Again, I don't know what would work for you, but you got to figure out the offstage time. If you don't, you're just going to burn out.
Okay. Well, are you familiar with Oral Roberts University?
Sure. Yep.
So I graduated from ORU in 2010, and they have this whole person mentality, spirit, mind, and body. And then I ran into a gentleman by the name of Mike Flynn. He has the Impact Entrepreneur Show. If you haven't met him, got to get you on his show. He's really great. But he developed something called his Bridges, which is faith, family, friends, finance, fitness, and fun. And a lot of what you're saying right now is on the offstage aspect, how to be holistic in these areas, almost as if it's a wheel, and each one of those is a wheel. And if you have any shortage in those areas, it creates a more bumpier ride.
That's right.
Those are 6 areas. One, for me, I find it difficult to try to be phenomenal in all those areas. I want to be, and I know our audience wants to be. So what can we do to sort of inflate those areas so that it's a more, let me phrase this that way, so our wheel is less bumpy?
Yeah. Well, I think you've really put your finger on something important, because I talk about that too. You know, I talk about it sort of under the umbrella or the metaphor of domains, you know, that there's a lot of different domains that make up our life. You know, there's a spiritual domain, intellectual, emotional, physical, marital, parental, vocational, avocational, financial, you know, all these different aspects. And sometimes you feel like somebody trying to spin a bunch of plates and keep them all in the air at the same time. Well, I think there are seasons where we give attention to those things that are weak and most necessary at that moment. But some of those we have to give a little attention to, or, you know, the car, to use your metaphor, the wheels, is going to go off the road. It's going to be thrown out of alignment. It's going to go off the road, and there's going to be a big crash. The best way I know how to do that is to design it. And I would say that in my experience, most people live by one of 2 basic kind of approaches to life. One is simply to drift. They don't design. They're not proactive. They're passive. They're just kind of taking the next thing that, you know, comes over the tennis net and trying their best to return it back over the net. They're reactive. And the problem with drifting is that no one ever drifted to a destination they would have chosen, right? So people drift to bad things. They don't drift to good things. The alternative to that is to design. So I wrote a book with Daniel Harkavy called Living Forward, and it's all about creating a life plan for your life. And so taking each of those domains that I articulated, and in the book we talk about 9 different domains, and coming up with a vision, with a purpose, and with a set of commitments to each one of those domains, so that over the course of the next 10 to 25 years, we end up at a destination we choose, not a destination we drift to. Then I wrote my book, Your Best Year Ever, which is all about annual goal achievement, setting annual goals, 7 to 10 annual goals. And I talked about the best science. What science teaches us about goal achievement Again, so we don't drift, but so we design a bigger, better future. And then my book, Free to Focus, is kind of ground zero. And that's what do we do today so that we link up our vision for our life with our annual goals, with our quarterly goals, and what I need to do this week so that I make sure that I'm making steady, incremental progress toward the life I want. So all those kind of fit together.
That's awesome. You know, within Keller Williams, we have this saying, it's life by design, not default.
Perfect.
And while I absolutely love that, you literally just taught me how to apply that to my life. And I really liked the idea where you're setting the goals in each area, because there's some areas that I've set goals in, but not others. You know, ideally in the spiritual aspect, I'm probably not as rigorous as I would be in my health or in my business.
Mm-hmm.
So here's my question regarding that. Assuming we set goals, what is the best form of accountability? Because I feel like, you know, unless if an individual is completely 100% motivated all the time and never wears down, accountability is probably the next step to help attain those goals. What would be the best form of accountability?
Well, let me talk about accountability, but let me just preface it with two things that are prerequisites to accountability. First of all, your goals need to be written. It's amazing when I speak across the country and I ask audiences, how many of you believe in the power of written goals? I mean, every hand goes up in the audience.
Right.
I say, okay, how many of you have a current set of goals for your life and business? Raise your hand. Now, all of a sudden, every hand drops except for about 5% of the audience. Shocking. So to have a set of written goals, there's a power in writing our goals down that sets our intention, sets our resolve, and begins the creative process about actually bringing that into existence. The next thing is we can't have too many goals. I know people get all excited about goal achievement. They get all excited about creating a bigger, better life. And so they create 35 goals. But the best research shows, and this is what I teach, no more than 7 to 10 goals per year and no more than 2 to 3 goals per quarter. Here's why. You're devoting a huge amount of your resources, your time, your attention, your money to maintaining the whirlwind of your existing life, right? All the stuff that has to go into maintaining your life as you know it. New initiatives, goals, by necessity exist outside that whirlwind. So you've got to borrow resources from your life inside the whirlwind to attack those goals outside the whirlwind. So you can't take on too much. There's an ancient Chinese proverb that says, man who chases 2 rabbits catches neither. Right. So if we can concentrate and focus our resources over fewer goals, we're going to have much better chance of succeeding. Okay, now we get to accountability. If we've got written goals, if we don't have too many goals, now we can lean into accountability. Some people teach and think that you should go very public with your goals. I used to teach this. I used to blog about my goals, and I would, put them out there to the world. I thought if I'm accountable to my blog readership, then I'll accomplish these goals. Derek Sivers did some amazing research, and I cover this in your best year ever, but some amazing research that shows actually when you do that, you're less likely to accomplish your goals. And you know why? Because your brain thinks you've already accomplished it. We talked about it. I must have already accomplished it. I can let my foot off the gas. The best strategy, and there's some research by Dr. Gail Matthews at Dominican University that proves this, that when we share our goals selectively with a small group of people, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's our spouse, maybe it's a buddy in business or a mastermind, but when it's a select group and a group of people that are for us, a group of people that want to believe the best about us, but also people that, will kick our butts when we get off track and keep us on track and hold us accountable, that's the best kind of group to share our goals with. And so I believe strongly in the power of accountability groups and have an accountability partner for each of the goals you're trying to achieve.
Okay. Now, I believe you came up with a focus journal. Is that correct?
Yes, I have something called the Full Focus Planner, and I also have the Full Focus Journal. Those are 2 different products.
Okay. So I'm pretty sure I have the planner.
Okay.
It's blue, isn't it? The hardback, and it has like a gold and purple.
Yep.
Yep.
There
That's
you
what
go.
I have.
It's actually gray, dark gray,
Gray.
and it has a blue and orange ribbon.
Well, what's funny is for whatever reason, I guess I didn't realize you wrote that until a couple of days ago. And I've used it on and off. And I tell
Okay.
you what, every time I use it, I'm blown away by how productive I am. But I haven't created the habit of being consistent with it.
Yeah.
So how do we develop the habits to be consistent with the things that we want to get in? Especially like with this journal for me, every time I've used it, I've gotten in a great rhythm, but then, the weekend rolls around or I miss a day or two and then I forget.
Yeah.
What would you have to say to someone who has not developed that habit? How would they do that?
Well, first of all, don't beat yourself up. That's a common situation, right? So I do have a set of tutorial videos that walk people through how to use it. But I find that it's best if you can make the planner habit a part of your morning ritual. Now, what's a morning ritual? Well, first of all, everybody has one,
That's
and
awesome,
and
because
it's
that's
either
my next question
designed.
for you. Sorry. So I love the fact that you're hitting all these questions before I have to ask them. That's why I'm not doing a lot of talking. So keep going.
Good. Well, so everybody has a morning ritual. It's either well designed or it's not well designed. It's either by default or it's by design, to use your Keller Williams phrase. So part of my morning ritual, and by the way, for me, a morning ritual is what can I do to best set me up for a highly productive, highly successful day. And I learned this from the world of athletics, professional athletics, where pro athletes, they don't just leave it to chance. They don't just show up at the stadium hoping that they have a good day. No, they go through a very specific ritual. It's different for all of them, but it usually begins the night before the big game, and it starts with getting a good night's sleep. And then for me, one of the things that I incorporate into my morning ritual is filling out the day page on my daily planner. And I want to share with you a big idea, a game-changing idea. You know this from using the planner, but it's to identify your daily big three. Okay.
Right.
So here's what most people do. If they use a task list or have a to-do list, they come up, and we've surveyed our clients on this. The average person has about 15 items on their task list. Now, here's what we know about having 15 things on our task list. You wake up knowing full well that you don't have a chance of achieving all 15 of those. So you're immediately overwhelmed before the day has even begun. You're playing a game you can't possibly win. Then even if you get 8 of those 15 done, you still got 7 left undone. So you go to bed defeated that you didn't achieve everything on your to-do list. So what I want to say is, let's forget that and let's design a game that we can win. The Pareto principle says that 20% of the activity drives 80% of the result.
Yeah.
20% of 15 is 3. So if we can pull out the 3 high leverage tasks, the tasks that really will move the needle, the tasks that are important, that are related to our goals or important projects, and identify those, isolate those from all the other tasks, and say to ourselves, if I get these 3 tasks done today, I'm going to consider it a win, and I'm going to go to bed feeling great about today. You do that every day for 250 work days. That's 750 important actions that you take a year. That will change the trajectory of your business. That will change the trajectory of your life. Now, you can still have your other tasks because inside, this is my page for today, but inside the Full Focus Planner, I've got my 3 things that are my big 3, and then I've got a spot here for other tasks. So that's all the other stuff that, I've got 1 today, which if I don't accomplish it, not a big deal. I could push it forward, but those 3, those are what I'm focused on. That also keeps me, Evan, from being distracted because I've got a focal point that can command my attention.
Okay. So regarding your book, you've pretty well nailed all the questions I had before I could even ask them. What in your book have we not discussed that you want to talk about?
I think one of the key concepts is the idea of the ideal week.
Okay.
So I talk about this in chapter 7, and I unpack the idea of mega batching. This is also where I get into that 3 stages of time. But the idea of an ideal week is, how would I design my week for optimal efficiency and efficacy if I had 100% control of my time?
Okay.
Okay. So for me, that might look like I consolidate all of my internal meetings, my team meetings, my one-on-one meetings on Monday. The reason for that is because you get into that headspace, and it's a good place to get. You don't have the switching cost of jumping from context to context. Like you're on a phone call and then you jump to a meeting and then you're trying to do some paperwork. There's a switching cost to all that leads to inefficiency. So I consolidate all my internal meetings on Monday. I bookend that, and have all my external meetings on Friday. For me, and again, it's going to be different for everybody, that leaves Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 1 day of backstage time, 2 day of front stage time. And what that looks like, for example, on some weeks, my front stage time, I might be producing my podcast, and I batch produce them. I call this mega batching, but I'll do 13 episodes in a day and a half. Then I don't think about it again for a quarter. But when you've got an ideal week, then all of a sudden you can start pushing stuff into the places where it works for you, not for somebody else. So for you, for example, in the real estate business, maybe all of your evenings are blocked off. Those are times when you're showing buyers around to properties. I don't know what it is.
Right.
Maybe there's another time when you're cold calling. Maybe there's another time when you're doing the administrative stuff. But what would your week look like if you had 100% control of the time? Now, another thing I have to admit is I rarely have the ideal week, because you start out with a plan, then life happens. So I would say on average, I probably get close to 85 or 90% of my ideal week. But there's always stuff that happens outside of it, and I'm not legalistic about it, but it gives me a design. It gives me a pattern to follow.
Right. I think it was Mike Tyson that said,
Yeah.
you go into the ring and you have this plan, and then it goes right out the window once you get punched.
That's exactly right. That's a great way to say it.
Who knew we would have wisdom from Mike Tyson in this interview?
I know.
So Michael, I have 3 questions that I ask every one of our guests. And the first one, it's, what is the biggest lie in your own self-talk that you currently have or that you have had in the past? And the reason why I ask it is because, when people look at Michael Hyatt, like, man, he's where I want to be. He has arrived. So I try to humanize our guests and help our audience to connect with one another, because I know, as someone who's listened to many podcasts, I felt disconnected because it just seemed so superior. And so let me humanize you, Michael.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to share. First of all, limiting beliefs are something I teach about, and I talk about replacing them with liberating truths. And once I get rid of those liberating beliefs, or excuse me, the limiting beliefs, one of the things I find is that I accumulate new ones every year. So the one I'm currently working on, that is, I've had to be really intentional and do some serious work on this, is that it's the limiting belief that everybody's already heard this before.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I'm sharing stuff. It's not that new. It's not revolutionary. People are going, yeah, I've heard that before. And I don't know why I have that limiting belief, but I have that limiting belief. And it's probably because I've had a few critics that say, they'll write a book review and say, well, there's nothing really new here. And, thankfully that's in the minority, but, even I could have 500 book reviews and get one review like that and go, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Right. And so that's what I'm currently working on.
Okay. So here's the next one. What brings you peace?
My morning ritual is so important to me. I begin every morning by reading the Bible, and then by praying, and then by journaling. And that's kind of the foundation of my morning ritual. I do other things. I work out every day. I write every day. But those 3 things, I am in my happy place when I start my day with that, because I feel like I'm really at peace and really centered.
That's awesome. What's the best decision that you've ever made?
Marrying my wife, without question. We've been married 41 years. She's my biggest cheerleader, my best friend. She's the first person I want to talk to when I wake up in the morning, when I come home at night. So yeah, without question, the trajectory of my life would have looked vastly different if I had not met and married her.
That's so awesome, because, with individuals that have great relationships with their spouses that are successful, I've noticed something in each one of them is that their spouses have played a key in their success. And I guess, side topic, getting into marriage, there's always those limiting doubts or limiting beliefs or voices in your head that wants to say it's not going to work. It's not worth it. Don't put up with the frustration. And my wife and I fought through those early on in our marriage. And I look back now, not saying that we're 100% arrived, because we're not perfect, but we are far better than where we used to be. And I got to tell you, I'm so glad I stuck it out, because I have one of the most incredible wives as well. So Michael, I love hearing you say that, because what is it? 50 or 60% of Americans with their marriage ends in divorce.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that just got married. There's another group that get together that never get married, and
right.
relationships don't work. So talk about your spouse in the context of how it's provided, I guess, that solid ground for people that might have not as great of a quality of relationship that you have with your own spouse.
Evan, I think everything shifted when we learned that our differences were not something that we should resent, but something we should embrace. So, when you're first dating, opposites attract. So you find that your spouse is different, and, that's alluring. You're attracted to that. And then those differences annoy. And then it's like, why can't she be like me? And I try to make her like me, and she tries to make me like her. And then you get to the place where hopefully where those differences, you appreciate those differences.
Right.
And so one of the things we've done a lot of work around is personality testing. And on every personality test, whether it's Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram or the DISC or, you name it, we're like the exact opposites. The day that we realized that meant that we had more resources inside of our marriage, and just to give you one example, my wife loves to research. She's very thorough. So we don't make a decision unless it's well-researched, unless she's had a chance to be really thorough in the pursuit of that, clarity about that decision. I, on the other hand, what I bring to the marriage is I'm a quick start. Sometimes I can be impulsive, but the way that helps both of us is because of her, we're not impulsive. Because of me, we don't stay stuck in the paralysis of analysis. So we're better together than we are separate. So I think that's one of the things that's really helped us in our marriage.
So how can we add value to you? Because you came on the show, and I'm so extremely grateful. We're talking about your book. What else can we do to bring value to you?
Well, I just appreciate you getting the word out, and the best place for people to go find out about the new book about Free to Focus, which, by the way, is the #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller. You can find out more at freetofocusbook.com, and you can buy the book from anywhere. But if you put the receipt number in a special box that we have on that page, then we'll give you a bunch of cool bonuses related to the book that'll help you implement what I teach easier and faster. So I'd be grateful for people to go check it out. Even if you don't buy the book, check it out and see what's there and see if it's for you.
Do you have a specific place that you wish people to purchase the book from?
Nope. I just say we're, better booksellers everywhere.
All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom and life experience. Because, as an individual who struggles with focus, I had a huge takeaway here on several things. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Evan. I appreciate you having me on.